All right, welcome everybody. We are having some technical issues thanks to free Wi-Fi. I am actually had Wi-Fi down, CenturyLink, at my house, and Daniel is on the road and is at Starbucks, and Google Plus does not want to play friendly with the Wi-Fi. You know, we're having cloud issues on Cloud Talk today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do our best to just join the Twitter chat. I'll drop all the questions in our normal chat, and we will jump back on video again next week, since it's one of those things that we are outside of our control. But hopefully you guys are on the Twitters. Hashtag Cloud Talk. We are very thankful for our sponsors, IBM, Avnet. We should say that this should be sponsored by McDonald's today, since I'm at McDonald's Wi-Fi, since the internet in my area is broken. So we're going to jump in and talk today, contextualizing big data. And Daniel wrote a really good post on this recently, and it caused a lot of comments, questions, and items kind of talking about, okay, we know the term data, we know big data, but what does data have to do? How do we take data and make actually business decisions with it? So going beyond just gathering a bunch of data, but actually taking this data and making it actionable. So with that being said, we're going to jump into question one. I'm going to fire out question one there on the Twitters. I'd love to get your feedback, since I am the only one on video right now. We will do it this way. Hopefully you guys still get some value out of this, this chat today. And question number one. So question number one we have going out is, how does contextualizing big data help a business make better strategic decisions? And that's really where we're focusing today's conversation on. And really what that really is meaning for all of us is, what does, data, and the reason I think big data, it has a bad name, and whoever named it big data I have issues with, is because the idea of big, it means everybody just gathers a ton of data and they have this big repository or a big, storage array full of this data, but it doesn't have any context to it. It's not itemized, it's not categorized. And most of the times people gather the data but don't know what to do with it. So question one we have going out there is, how does contextualizing big data help a business make better business decisions? So we will kind of bring in some of the questions from our community. First off, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I see Daniel in the Twitter. So Daniel is utilizing the Starbucks Wi-Fi, hopefully for Twitter access. I see Josh McCormick's in there today. Stuart Appley is in there today. Kristen Cardos. Happy birthday, Kristen. I know it's your birthday today. Tamara McCleary, good friend of mine. Rachel Miller, the host, my co-host there at Social Selling Hour, is also in the Twitters. So with this question one, we have, and one of our previous guests, Tim McDonald, just jumped in and joined. So since I'm solo on the topic today, I want to kind of talk about, we're going to frame some of these questions on historical data, some situational data, social data. We'll even talk a little bit about social data and how we can leverage social data. But when it comes to that, actually, I'm getting a message from Daniel right now, so I was making sure I send that. It says call is not available, so Google must not be a fan of his today. So let's see if I can invite Daniel back in, and we will get him in as we jumping into question one. All right. So Tim McDonald said the context of data provides the ability to tell a story. Bingo. I love that. That's the provide accuracy around your data, allow you to actually bring all your data, pull it together, and actually make actionable decisions. I like to think about no data is worth gathering if you cannot use that data to make actionable decisions. And so that's something I kind of preached. I know with social data or with cloud data, I worked in the data center industry for a while. We could pull all of these different sensors from the data center, from a modular data center, we could do cooling temperatures, we could do valve information. But if we weren't actually utilizing that data, why are we gathering it? It's just adding to the cluster that is big data. And so I see lots of McMuffin pictures floating through the Twitter stream as everyone is realizing that I'm enjoying the McDonald's. And I think Daniel's there. Hey, Daniel.
I'm at Starbucks.
So I said,
this is Cloud Talk from around the world.
It's Cloud Talk from free Wi-Fi. So you're on free Wi-Fi at Starbucks. I'm at free Wi-Fi at McDonald's. It's Cloud Talk sponsored by IBM, Avnet, and free Wi-Fi at our participating food joints.
Maybe we need to talk to our friends at Avnet and IBM about putting some hotspots that work a little better.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it doesn't help that Google Plus isn't really a big fan of slow connections to begin with. So we threw out question 1 there, and I know we talked about your framing post, but contextualizing big data. Why is that important? Like, what does contextualizing data really mean for businesses making decisions?
Well, I think that I'll take the blame for the buzzword because I wrote the article that sort of framed this thing. But contextualizing really all goes back to data is this word that we're throwing around all the time, like, oh my God, there's so much data. But really, for every business, right, the everyday business owner, big data is not an issue. What's an issue is how do I take better care of my customers, or where do I find more customers, or are my customers happy, and where are those pieces of information available, or for employee advocacy, that's important too. Are my employees happy? How are they being paid in comparison to the industry? These are all things that data can solve. So the whole idea of contextualizing data is, okay, you've got this big allotment of data, whether it's structured data like a graph or a chart or an Excel file, or it's an unstructured data like a bunch of tweets. But the first thing that needs to happen if any business is going to really benefit from data is they have to say, what are the questions I'm trying to answer? So that's really what I meant when I said contextualizing, is getting back to saying, what are the business questions we're trying to answer?
Well, and I like the term contextualizing better than kind of some of the more geeky SQL database type, I guess, labeling of data, because I remember taking SQL in college. It was one of my least favorite classes that I got to enjoy or participate there in college, and it was mainly because I couldn't understand about where we were taking structured data, what data really meant. I remember we were pulling in all of this data from all over the place, but we really weren't doing anything with it. And I think contextualizing really means is you have to. Tim Crawford jumped in there and said it's the context of the data provides the ability to tell a story and provide accuracy at the same time. I think the term accuracy with data is really important. I know we talked about that a couple of weeks ago on the show as well.
I'm trying to throw a few tweets out there too. I don't have my usual multiple screens that I can benefit from.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing how much you lose a second monitor, and the world of multitasking is not good. So I'm going to throw out question 2 there. So question 2 is 85% of Fortune 500 businesses aren't utilizing big data today. What's some things they can do to kind of change that statistic so in 2015 that number has changed?
Well, I think the starting point is education. So, Tim's very comment, right, that just came up was about the ability to put fact, what was the word he used, but it was basically, the exact science behind it, right, is that data now allows us to have answers that are no longer the gut feeling. I think businesses, especially small businesses, they love to say, like, my gut feeling is this. Like, I think my customers they love this new pie I have or this new widget I'm selling. But really, they have no idea if that's true. And so with that actual quantifiable data, now they can start to answer the question, what really is making their customers happy? So that's kind of, I think, the first thing that in the education side, they need to accept the fact that they will have better information with data. They will have a better ability to make decisions if they choose data. The second thing they need to realize is that big data isn't only for the enterprise solution. They need to be able to see what is out there, because big data, really can be anything from just sorting an Excel file into something usable to partnering. I've talked about companies like Kaggle that actually can do small projects with big data, where a company might go to you and say, here's the problem we're trying to solve, and for as little as $3,000 to $5,000, they can do a big data, an entire analysis and come back to you with a report. So there's a lot of solutions out there, and I think what starts, so I mean, I touched on a lot of things there, Brian, but I think what it really starts at is accepting the fact that big data is something that's very usable in any business context.
Well, I think you hit it on the head there. I remember working at an enterprise. I've always had an enterprise type background for a long time, and then I started consulting and helping some small businesses. And the first thing they would say is, Brian, don't go down that big data path. We know that you're going to talk about the importance of data, but data is an enterprise type thing. We don't have the people to help with that. Yeah, you can mute yourself there, Daniel. I can hear a truck backing up. But the idea of data for more, I was inside of QuickBooks the other day, and I was amazed how much, QuickBooks, if you're a small business and you're using Square or using some of these transactional point of services devices, it's feeding all of this data into QuickBooks, and I couldn't believe how much output of data was available in QuickBooks that was actionable. It could even tell me trends on how many times someone had to swipe a credit card before it actually ran the card correctly, through the Wi-Fi. And I was like, that's some data that's probably valuable for your business. That if you were able to contextualize it and utilize that, you could probably make more strategic decisions on, is your point of service machines in the right part of the store? Do you need to ramp up your Wi-Fi? We're sitting at free public Wi-Fi locations today. So I think the idea of data, of taking data, understanding what data is available, I think is probably step one. And step two is, okay, this is all of the data available. Let's start with data that we can actually gather, and then we can actually make a decision.
All right. Well, think about this too. Like, here's a great example today. I would pay gladly $5 or $10 to have had a higher speed connection than what they're offering the free public here where I'm sitting. Data would be a great way to analyze that. Like, how many people, if that was made available, might actually be willing to pay, and could Wi-Fi be an actual revenue generator for, how many Starbucks retail, outlets are there in the world? I mean, it's unbelievable, but, they could offer, it would be so easy for them to set that up.
Oh yeah, especially like, if some of these ones where they have like the 15 minutes and then it times you out. Hopefully McDonald's and Starbucks are not like that, so you and I don't drop off this call. But, you're right, I would pay or, scan my receipt or put in, a 5-digit number to be able to have access to it for an hour at a free Wi-Fi location. And I'd even give them my email address, right? I'd provide them my email address to spam me with marketing stuff if they were able to provide me additional, increase my customer experience. So I think that's something that businesses definitely have to factor in. So as we jump into question 3 here, I think I want to walk down some of these types of data that you kind of discussed in your article that I thought were really important. So first one we're going to talk about is kind of demographic data. So why is demographic data important, and what are some of those examples?
I think for for most businesses, right, we are segmenting, right? I mean, Millennial CEO is our core content site, right? And we're actually trying to target a certain age group and generation of people with content. Now, that doesn't mean that other people can't benefit from it, but every business is trying to break that down, like, who is our target customer? So some of the easiest answers that big data could help companies come up with is not only who's our target, but like, let's break them down. Let's break them down by age. Let's break them down by gender. Let's break them down by where they live. Let's break them down by their income, their socioeconomic status. Let's break them down by how well traveled they are. And what's really neat about demographic data is we usually think of like the 3 or 4 core answers, like maybe age, location, race, gender. But nowadays, that demographic stuff can go so much further because we can target. We could say, I want to know people that went to undergraduate school and then attended grad school but didn't finish grad school. Because I want to know people who are maybe interested in potentially going back and finishing their master's degree.
No, that's a good point. I think that element of demographic data is also important from like a location services piece. I know I was on the Twitter chat last night, T-Chat, and T-Chat was talking about the downsides of social media and how recruiters are utilizing social media today. And one of them was they were talking about location services. It's funny because we know that when it comes to data and location services, it's not like Las Vegas. Not what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. What happens on the internet stays on the internet. Like you're kind of out there, as a whole. And one of the things is location.
Wait. By the way, what happens in Vegas does not stay in Las Vegas.
Very true. I agree.
There's data. You know how many cameras are in Las Vegas collecting data?
Yes, and well, actually, that's a good point. So demographic data, or even locational data, but demographic data, one of the ones that's interesting for me is like I would love to know device type of data correlated to age or sex of a person, because like when someone was trying to build an app and they were trying to decide if they want to do an Android app or an iOS app. Right now, the trend is you always do iOS first, and then you do Android, and it's mainly because the amount of the App Store, and there's and I'm an Apple fan, but I also like a lot of the Android-based apps. But I thought it was interesting. One of the companies that I was working with, they did a real big study on their target demographic was 18 to 30-year-old males, and they're looking for rather uber geeky males that are willing to go in there and do some customized tweaking. And for them, a majority of those users are actually Android users. Therefore, they're designing their app based on the data that they gathered. If they read every study and did what the industry is doing, they would have created the app for iOS. But they used the demographic that they were targeting. They isolated that information, listened to that data. Android made more sense, and they're going Android.
Isn't that really interesting, though? Because that's entirely possible. And I think that's kind of like that demarc between the, kind of like what I call the ultra entrepreneurial small company and then the growing sort of SMB and enterprise, is that even in the smallest business, contextualizing data is somewhat simple to getting back to just, like I said, maybe it's 3 or 4 questions, but who's my customer, and actually getting fact-based information on who they are. So we talked about demographics, right? Who's the demographic of our customer? And then it's actually getting a little bit deeper, like what's the difference between my happiest customers and my least happy customers? And there's really not a lot of limitation for a small company to be able to collate that data, right? And then for that growing enterprise, then it starts to get into things like that. For a growing tech company that's saying, hey, we need to know what platform to use. That's entirely possible, running that kind of research. And I actually think, one of the industries we should probably think about disruption and what disruption may be going on is the market research industry. Like big data really, because we used to have to bring think tanks together and put people in a room and ask them questions, and now all that information's sort of out there. It's just something to sort of think about. So now the next think tanks are going to really become almost like companies that can organize data, like the one I talked about, like Kaggle, or like Watson, what Watson's going to be able to do with Twitter.
No, and I think that's a great point. And really, I had gotten this great discussion with my dad yesterday. My dad, and I'll give a shout out and a plug to Social Selling Hour that Rachel Miller and I host. And I know Rachel actually posted that answer to question 3 was personalization of data, and really being able to target individual profiles, and I thought that was a valid point. And I think one of the things we talked about in Social Selling Hour this past week was we were discussing like how my dad is a salesman, and my dad today is a non-social seller, right? He does not have social media. But what he was telling me about when I was on the phone with him last night was he's actually using data on analytics from his website to actually determine who he's emailing. And my dad's not social, he's not digital, but yet he's utilizing some of these easy data points. For him, he was laughing because he's like, all I did was click on a report from GoDaddy and it sent me all this information. And he's like, Brian, now I have all this information to email people better. And I said, man, if my dad can do that as a salesman that owns a candy company, that is non-social, that is, I'd say, technology for him is the fact that if his laptop comes on every morning and his iPhone 4 still works, he's a happy guy. If he's using this data to make better decisions on who he's emailing or prioritizing his email list, certainly these other businesses can do the same. So we're going to jump into question 4, and we're going to kind of walk down these other types of data. So when we're thinking, we talked about contextualizing data, the importance that. We talked about demographic data. Now let's talk about historical data. What are some of and I married a high school teacher that is a history teacher, so I think it's always funny anytime we talk about history. I will say that I play in the value of how do we study our historical data and the history of something to make future decisions. I think this is a fun topic and a fun question.
Well, I think predictive analytics are the next big thing, right? But predictive analytics only really work when we know what's happened in the past, right? So really, that's a fancy term. Predictive analytics are a fancy term for being able to crunch the trends of a certain time period in the past and then basically tell you what trends are going to continue. So you may know there's trends work in 2 ways, right? Trends work in linear and trends work in circular at the highest level, right? So meaning either a trend's going to go and continue forward. Great example of that is proliferation of bandwidth, right? Or the cost of storage. They're linear. The trend is going to continue to get cheaper, or bandwidth is going to continue to get greater, right? At pretty much a linear rate. There's no end in sight right now. Whereas a great story I always heard was there was a time when there were so many. We talked about Vegas, like Elvis impersonators in Vegas. There was a time when the growth of Elvis impersonators in Vegas was growing at like a rate of 20% per year. And if you'd plug that into a linear trend, what they had found out was, like, at that time, by like 2010, 1 in 3 people in Las Vegas would have been an Elvis impersonator. But that was a circular trend because it became very popular after Elvis passed away. So, the same thing is kind of going on here, is that with data is we have all this information. For years and years, we've been using software packages for accounting. We've been using software packages for CRM. And there's a lot of information inside of it that we just never done anything with. And so what's going to happen is now we're going to be able to take that data and say, what were the 5 key activities that took place in the last 6 months before someone bought something? Or what were the last 3 months of an employee who maybe left?
And I think that's actually an interesting one. Like, I love the idea of studying historical employee data, especially because I come from I focus on social business and employee advocacy side of my last role. And like exit interviews are fine, but let's study the data on things they were doing for the 6 months prior to them hitting the eject button, right? And part of the problem with, I think, historical data is it scares the crap out of people because it's the truth. You can't really fudge a lot of that data from the past when it comes to historical data.
It's a super I guess I'd say it's kind of like a super sexy topic because everyone's talking predictive analytics right now. But really what they're talking is historical data. And that's what nobody's using those terms, but what they're really saying is that we're going to finally help you make all that, it's kind of like the files. Remember an old company, like you'd go into a 50-year-old company and they'd have like an entire warehouse full of files. And now what's basically data is allowing us to do is go through all those files in a very simple and meaningful manner and actually determine strategic business decisions we should make.
Yeah, and I think this is a good one. Brian Yarnish, Marketing Hits, who is a must-follow, by far the best person on Scoop It, the tool that I use for content curation. But I'm glad he's in Cloud Talk today, and he said data history improves targeting and lowers the cost to connect to the end user or buyer. I thought that's an interesting one where it improves targeting, because part of it is if you can study the past to predict the future, part of that is you're building personas. And there's also an element there where when I was at IBM, the IBM event where IBM Insight, it was a big data conference, and I was sitting there with Thomas from Twitter, and we were walking around, and one of the big things that we were working with, one of the guys that we were talking to, was about movie data. And actually one of the cool movie data historical trends was they were actually doing comparison and analysis on the hashtag that a movie uses and the success in the box office. Because some of these movies use hashtags that make no sense, or they use a Twitter handle that is the box office that has nothing to do with the movie itself. And they were actually able to use the historical data of that hash and decide what the future Twitter handles should look like for these new movies that are coming out. And I thought that because a movie is one of those things where as it goes live, it's it probably has a shelf life of 2 or 3 months, then it goes to video or Netflix, and it kind of goes into a different realm. But they're using historical data. We don't have to think about historical data as something that's 10 years old or like World War II data. Historical data could be data that's happening an hour ago, 10 minutes ago. I think that's something that we have to remember when we're talking historical data.
It's funny you say that. My daughter and I were in the car and we were talking about history, and I actually was laughing with her, and I said, that last sentence you had is now history. Like that last thought, like this, what I'm saying right now is now history, effectively now. So we were sort of having that little debate because, she was kind of asking me, why do we need to do history? So we went into that, but you're muted.
No, that's an interesting one too. That's an interesting one because one of the things with the historical data, Nima in Twitter put on there, historical data can provide predictive analysis capacities for businesses to make better future decisions. And I would question that if everyone that's utilizing data or implementing big data solutions today, are they really understanding the value of historical data? Because I think part of the problem with historical data is just like, why is personal branding for employees not working? Because it's not that our leaders are afraid of their employees being successful. They're afraid of their employees being successful and leaving. And it's the same thing with this historical data. Why are we not utilizing it? Because partially it's going to expose what you suck at. And as a manager, how many managers are okay with looking at historical data and saying, well, this is what we did really bad over the last 6 months? A good manager will, because they're confident that they can take that data and make better strategic decisions, and hopefully their leadership gives them enough bandwidth to improve on what they did over this past 6 months. But I think that's part of the problem with historical data, is that it scares people because it does expose some of the weaknesses, especially the weaknesses that they're responsible for recently.
It's a great segue into employee advocacy too, is that you mentioned that. Like, I would love to test that theory, because I've said that. I actually had that debate with Rachel Miller. I said that when people get too successful, companies don't want people on social that have too big of a personal brand, because I said it's distracting to the company, and we've seen that happen in a few cases with some of our friends, where they've been kind of pushed out of these enterprises because they almost. But I said, I wonder if you could actually correlate and run that data to determine, like, employees who are empowered to be social and grow their personal brand, do they actually end up leaving, or do they end up becoming advocates that drive more revenue and more awareness for a company? I think it'd be a really interesting data study to see what's actually true there.
Or even companies today where if they don't, and this goes to the social media element of it, if they don't believe in the power of social media, which we're having a conversation right now with people all around the world. We have Mark Longbottom, who's across the pond. You're in Chicago, or you're actually in Florida now for an event. I'm in Arizona. There's all these. We're all over the place, and we're connecting and engaging. One of the things that I would say is take one of your campaigns for marketing that you did without leveraging your employees' social media. Measure and benchmark that, and then do the same thing, but activate, incentivize, and train your employees to amplify your message. And then let's compare apples to apples there and see how that historical data of your past campaign without social employees measures to the new one. So I think that's one of the things that we need to, we can really kind of discuss. So now let's jump into question 5. And question 5 is, we talked about historical data, we talked about demographical data, and now we're going to talk about situational data. And this might be my favorite one to talk about, because the idea of situational data is I really like to make dynamic decisions on data in real time. And I use that quote, and I'll use it again. Real time is really important. But if you're able to add the context and situational elements to it, you're actually able to make a decision at the right time. So the real time and the right time are not always the exact same. And I think that's something situational data can kind of leverage. So when you think about situational data, what's your thoughts on, like, what are some examples, and really where does situational data fit in the element for making better business decisions?
Well, I think, again, because it's the overarching theme is contextualizing data, right? And the underarching things that were coming up is like demographic and historical, situational. And so, there's a little overlap with all of them, but the bottom line is, like, it's that question, what is the problem you're trying to solve today? Right? What is the situation of my business? Because some businesses, and again, with SMBs who are maybe trying to get into big data, because that's a lot of who we're trying to attract, is that mid-market, say, company saying, okay, do you do data or not do data? And the bottom line is their situation, maybe they need revenue growth. Maybe they feel, or maybe, at this point their retention of employees is great. Maybe their, customer service records are positive, but their revenue growth is off. So what can they possibly actually use to benchmark? What kind of data? The situation is we need to grow revenue. So it kind of starts piecing everything together to basically support, what is the situation we're trying to solve. So that's kind of, I think, what I was trying to hit on with that topic.
Can we call you back in a little while?
No, and I think when we talk about situational data, I always like to take situational data and I put it in the sense of a sports team. If you guys watch NFL today, the NFL sits on the sidelines and they sit there with they're using a Windows device tablet right now because Windows is their sponsor. But like I was watching, and I hate to say that, give Tom Brady or the Patriots any cred since I'm a Steelers fan, but I was watching Tom Brady come to the sidelines after he went down the field and scored a touchdown, and it took 11 plays or whatever, and the first thing he was doing was taking the iPad out or the Windows tablet and flipping through there, looking and analyzing all of this information. And I was like, dude, he's using situational data because he wants to use the trends that the defense is using and use that information so that he can make a better decision in about 5 minutes. And he's taking that data in real time. And that's that might be the extreme side when we're thinking about a sports team. But I mean, I'm thinking about that even from the standpoint of if you have an event going on and it's a 3-day event, if you're able to monitor and gather data from day 1 and make more strategic decisions for day 2, that's powerful. I mean, each one of those, you don't have to wait till the event is over to analyze data and then make decisions for the next event a year from now. You can actually make that incremental changes along with that data throughout the process. And I think that's something that we kind of have to really kind of capitalize on.
I think that's a great example, and everybody that just took a little field trip with me, my power on my computer was about to die. So this is like the ultimate mobility cloud, social. I mean, we've absolutely hit the entire gamut. Now all we need is like an Internet of Things device.
Yep, I'd say we are definitely leveraging the cloud that we're discussing, and I think one of the
we
ones
love you guys for hanging with us.
we are the true example that there is no excuse for doing a hangout or not being able to do a hangout or a Twitter chat from anywhere in the world, no matter what technology throws at you. I think that's it's a good example of that side. And one of the things in Twitter, the right time capacity is enabled by big data and employee situational knowledge. And Rachel Miller tweeted that out just now. And I think that's actually a powerful idea where we're talking about right time capacity, utilizing data, and then putting context behind it, which is that employee or, one of the things that always frustrated me was if you want your community manager to be the face of your organization and them to get all of this, gather this contextual feedback from your community, your customers, why are you not bringing that community manager to the business decision table, sitting there with your CEO, sitting there with the decision makers of your company? Because the context that your community manager can provide can oftentimes make the difference between data being kind of all over the place and really honing in that data so that you're making true situational decisions.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, and it's probably another topic for another day, maybe one of our more social-focused conversations, is that community manager who's acting as the brand on a day-to-day basis, and why that's not a more senior role in organizations. So, and I just put it out on Twitter. I love your example of the NFL. That's a situational data. Can you think about how much different NFL is today because these real-time information these guys get? You look at Brady and Manning on the sidelines, and they literally can study the tendencies of the defense just from the last drive and literally make adjustments on the fly. Do you imagine?
Well, I mean, it eliminates Bill Belichick now doesn't have to go take video cameras of people's practices, right? That's what he used to do. That was his historical way of gathering data. And now Belichick can actually take that real-time data that's happening on the field today. Like, I think you're right. Like, the NFL and sports always use data because they studied the last 5 games. They studied the last 5 times that they played a team. They used all of these things. Well, now rather having to study true historical data, they're studying historical data that happened on the drive beforehand or 5 minutes.
Moneyball?
Yes, Moneyball.
Example of of predictive analytics, and actually this goes back to before this was done on papers and charts and spreadsheets and whiteboards, chalkboards. But really, what we really entered is a time where rather than all the work being manual, we literally entered the machine age, right? There's that book, The Second Machine Age. I got to interview the guys that wrote it at Delta, but it was actually talking about that. See, now what's happening is Brady, for instance, we talked about him. He's doing his real-time film during the game. So now when he's watching film the next week, he's able to do more. So if you bring this back to that small business or that company that's trying to apply data, it's the same thing. The data is allowing them to get immediate answers on things like their financial situation. Like it used to take the accountant of a company a month to do the books. Now every transaction goes in. You know what I mean?
And the fact yeah, and you said immediate answer. Yanush on Twitter said some people are using situational data but don't understand it, like notifications and likes. And I think that idea where you were talking about, I think that's a really cool thing to say is they're using that data. It's real-time situational data that is technically historical data since it just happened the drive before, the play before. But now let's tie that to data that's happening maybe in the future or right now. And I think that's the social data element. And I talked about it. I don't know if I'm still the only one that's using Foursquare. I think we talked about that last week. But for me, when a company or a business can tie my historical data that is available for them based on, like, let's say Marriott rewards. They know where I've stayed over the last 5 years, which is 500 nights in 5 years at a Marriott. That's historical data they can utilize. But when I check in on Foursquare or when I post on Facebook this weekend that next week when I'm on my trip to Pittsburgh, I'm going to actually stay at a Marriott. Now social data that they can actually, if they can link that data that I'm going to stay at a hotel, my past stay history, and now combine those two things and engage or even say, thank you, or we hope you enjoy your stay as much as you enjoyed your stay in Bahrain when you were staying at our sister property, Ritz-Carlton. Like the idea of taking this data and leveraging with social. So question 6 is, what social data and tools can businesses implement to increase the customer experience, customer feedback, and how that works?
That's a great example. We love the Ritz here. The actual ability now, because you think about hotel chains, like you'll see our buddy Ted Rubin, he'll put his I'm at this hotel, and he'll immediately send him a gift basket because they know he's coming and he travels so much. You're starting to see that sort of stuff happen, and a lot of that's, I think, been done kind of off of clout and social influence, where they're saying how influential are you and they're going to take care of you. That's a first data point. Think about when they can actually tie that together with customer loyalty programs. And they can actually almost see immediately. Think about a data integration point between a social network and customer and social CRM. So now when they see a person tweet, they can immediately identify, is that person a customer? Where are they in our system? How often do they stay here? What are their preferences? And then I can respond to you in social and actually talk to you like, hey, your water, your smart water is already up in the room. I know you like smart water, or your coffee's ready, or that. I mean, think about how unbelievable and powerful that could be to driving the next level of customer experiences. It's almost predictive, right?
It is, and it goes down to what is the foundation of a social business in 2015. And a social business is finding ways to leverage technology like cloud, like big data, to create better customer experiences, right? So to create these better experiences, they need to be leveraging social. They need to be leveraging big data. They need to be leveraging cloud. And that's the key element, because you're not going to become a social business because you have a Twitter account that spams out your marketing information. But you are going to become a social business when you can leverage information and data that you already are gathering, tie that with social data, leverage the cloud technology to become more agile and more strategic. That's how you become a social business. And I think we have to change that methodology. Social business isn't because you tweet often. It's because you create new customer experiences based on all these different aspects.
Absolutely. And what's funny is that contextualization is really the conversation. So, we talked about social is a platform, social is about conversations. Now the data allows companies to have more meaningful conversations because they know what you like, they know what you're interested in, they know the history of the customer, they know, they can take all that information, then when they actually do decide to engage you in social, it's not random, Now today it's so random so often. It's like, hey, how are you? Or, what did you like about it? Well, actually, I don't like anything about it. I mean, you would know that if
I think you froze on us for a second there.
Oh, sorry about that. Darn cloud. And what I was saying is that, with social...
Are you back? Oh, yeah, we're no, it's cool. I think we got you now. Go ahead.
All right. No, what I was just saying is, social data really allows companies to engage at a whole new level, right? In the past, it was, I basically want to connect with you because I see you're talking about something relevant to me. But now they can say you're talking about something relevant and I know what you like. And I can make sure that instead of, sort of wasting the time and effort, I can get it right. So often they get it wrong. It's like, do you know that I had a terrible experience in the past in Marriott? Because if you paid attention, you would have known that. you looked at the data, you would have known that. You would have used this as an opportunity to rectify it. Those are the kind of things that social data
there for you,
businesses
buddy.
need to drive
So,
better customer.
no, but I couldn't agree more. I think it's the idea where you're creating better customer experiences. You're engaging just on, changing that customer engagement model and making it a better experience for not only the customer, but I mean, who doesn't want a better customer experience? I think I talked about this last week. Is that it's important to create better experiences, even if it's like if Target doesn't have Wi-Fi in their building, and I want to comparison shop on my phone, I'm going to go outside and comparison shop. And where before, if that price point was $1 difference, I probably would have just said, screw it, I'm going to buy the item at Target. Well, if they didn't have Wi-Fi and I had to go outside, and I realize now that I can buy it for $1 less at Amazon, I'm probably not going back in the store to buy it like I would have if they had Wi-Fi. I'm going to go back to my house and buy it, right? So I think the element there is creating a customer experience. Oh, did you lose me?
I did for a second.
Did you lose me?
Go back.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what happened there for a minute. But so data from a standpoint of like social beyond just the tweets and stuff. What are some social data, like, even if I would say even if it's the vanity metrics, what are some social data elements that you think that you see that maybe even play in the social selling or play into some of these other areas that businesses should be looking at?
I think at the highest level, right, the social data actually integrates with the three or four things we talked about: contextual, situational, demographic. Like, social data will immediately tell you gender. Social data will oftentimes tell you what people like, right? Your social data, people have profiles that most of them are public information. So companies can actually say, I know who you are, I know where you went to school, I know what you like, and I'm going to engage a conversation based on more information. This really actually blends really well with like your social selling conversations. There is no excuse anymore to get on a call with somebody and say, tell me about yourself. There's really no excuse to do that, except for maybe the most bizarre case of someone that maybe has no social existence. But I only know maybe one person that's like that.
Well, yeah, and I think that's important, and Rachel Miller, who's in the Twitters and helping us out, and her title is Chief Listener, and we co-hosting Social Selling Hour. So many times, what she's providing as examples is the fact that you're linking data and listening. So she's listening on social and utilizing and leveraging the data that she's gathering from her customers, utilizing tools like the CRM tools now that plug in social data, like Pipeliner CRM, Nimble, the Salesforce now, and it even goes to IBM Verse, where the email client that IBM is just rolling out, which is the new one, it's linking in data, people, and social, and it's not talking about messages, it's talking about conversations. And I think that's a valid point. We need to change how we're using technology. It's not messages one-to-one. It's these conversations and dynamic elements. Because I don't want to just look at the last time you emailed me on a certain topic. I want to look at a history of emails and how often we engage and what kind of things led to. Because I want to use data. Maybe it's interaction data as a seller. I just completed a sale. I want to look at the historical path. What was my path to purchase? How did I get that person to come and buy something from me? Because if I'm able to link all of that data together and go back, maybe I can leverage what just worked for all of my future sales, for future engagement. And I think that's important.
I think that's exactly what we were talking about with the whole opportunity that exists. I think most companies are actually much more eager to use data. I don't think they understand what data is. And that's really the biggest change that I think we need to build upon is education of what's possible with data. Because what you're saying is extremely possible for companies. Having a CRM is a great start, right? And this isn't, I'm not pushing CRM, but like a cloud-based CRM is very, very available to even the smallest company at, dollars per user per month. And the ability to track data, track conversations, and track engagement is going to give them the power to actually better understand their customer. I always say, businesses, we tend to trip over dollars to pick up pennies. And cloud and software and data out there could really allow us to achieve a whole new level of success that we're sort of missing because we're tripping on, gut and intuition, like gut feeling. Gut feeling sucks. Historically, companies that use data perform better. Every study out there says companies that use data perform better. Every CEO that says, my gut feeling got me there is like the one. There's 3 interviews a year on that guy, and those are the 3 that did it, and everyone else used data.
Yeah, and I think that's actually probably a good way of kind of summing up this entire event and the entire like I liked your blog post because we were talking about contextualizing data, and it's really like Tim Crawford said at the beginning of this of our Twitter chat. He said it's all about the idea of taking and putting context and story with your data, and you're streamlining your data down so that it's not as crazy and all over the place. And I think that that is a very valid point. And, I'll pull in a couple more from Twitter. Nima said, with social data, people momentum, and I think this is a good idea, momentum, which is an interesting way of labeling it. People momentum can be captured and harnessed when some momentum is happening. And it's really, if you're able to engage me before I know I needed to be engaged, I'm gonna become a loyal person to your company. Like if I'm able to go into my local grocery store and it's already gonna give me my coupons based on the things I bought last time I was at the grocery store, that's some powerful data. I'm willing to give up a lot of my privacy and a lot of my information if you're able to do that. And like a grocery store is a great example for me because I can't stand going to a grocery store and going, man, did I buy milk recently? Well, if I was able to go in there and because my transactions were tied to my person, and when I went back in the building, it was able to show me, well, you bought milk 3 days ago when you were in there, and granted, having 3 daughters, we buy a lot of milk. I would be able to see that on my phone. I'm going to go to that grocery store every time compared to going to a different grocery store because they created a better customer experience utilizing my data and leveraging it for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the ultimate omni-channel experience is going to be really built around big data. We're already seeing it, semantic web, tracking behavior and tracking what you're doing. And then we're actually storing, you're tracking your movements, using data points to decide what you may be interested in emailing you, trying to get you into their store to actually have that experience. So retail as a whole is an absolute hot, it's a hot spot for big data. But I actually think every industry has a huge play. And I mean, as we kind of wrap this up, I think, really, if I was going to make this in one way, it's the big data play is not limited to the big company. And I think that's what every company needs to start to kind of recognize is they can do better, they can do it with data, and there's means to do it. And that's whether it's social and the social stuff to do and the mobile stuff, all those different elements that have opportunities to leverage data.
I think it's perfect. So as we sign off, and we want to thank our sponsors, IBM Cloud and Avnet Cloud Ready Solutions. We have one more cloud talk before the end of the year because we just happen to have December 25th, Christmas falls on a Thursday, and then New Year's falls on a Thursday.
Christmas.
Yeah. So we have one more chat before the end of the year, and I think you had a really valid point where big data doesn't mean you have to be a big company to leverage it. So thank you everybody who joined on Twitter. We also have to give a shout out to Starbucks and McDonald's Wi-Fi since that made it possible for us to do this cloud-enabled discussion. And we will be back with you again next Thursday, noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hopefully not from free Wi-Fi. Hopefully from our.
Thanks for putting up with us too, right?
Yes.
I mean, hopefully we were entertaining enough that you said it was worth the noisy distractions and.
Yeah, the Twitter feed. Thank you everybody on there. Michael Boyce, Movie Stream, Kristen Cardos, Tamara McCleary, Mark Lombottom, Chris Barrows, Nima. We really appreciate. We had a live and active Twitter stream going on today, and I will make sure to engage and thank all of you out there on the Twitters after this. But till next week, enjoy the weekend here in December. Travel safe, Daniel-san, and we will see you in a week.
See you guys on the flip side.
Alrighty.